Playing Borderlands 2 for the first time last year was insanely fun. Fortunately for us, the fun doesn't need to stop because as well as the main campaign, there's also a fair few DLC for this game. Originally I wasn't planning on playing any of them at all, but when I started the second game and met Moxxie for the first time after skipping out on Underdome Riot in the first game, it kinda gave me some FOMO, so I decided to at least play through a couple of DLC this time. I end up playing the 4 story expansions and the 1 mini sequel DLC that helps bridge the story between the second and third game. I was considering doing the Headhunters DLC as well, but that looked more like smaller individual missions with extra gameplay content rather than story content, so I figured I could give it a miss for now. That being said, let's just get right into it. Legend tells of an enormous wealth of treasure hidden away by the late great Captain Gold D. Blade, guarded by his fearsome Leviathan. Many have tried and failed to find the treasure over the years, but none more notable than the pirate queen, Captain Scarlett, who's relentless in her pursuit of the lost treasure. Making our way over to the desert town of Oasis, we're greeted by a local named Shade. Helping Shade fight off some of the sand pirates in the area, we learn that Oasis has a major water shortage issue, and pretty much all of its residents except Shade have since died off. Though this doesn't stop Shade from trying to keep the town alive in spirit.
I am a tough man who says tough things in a growly voice. I can...
Corrupted.
After helping Shade out with a couple of side things, he points us in the direction of Captain Scarlett, and even provides us with a new vehicle to traverse the sandworm-infested desert called a sand skiff. This was pretty dope. Granted, they are restricted to the specific DLC, but I wanted more vehicle options and here it is. So wasting no time, I hopped in and hovered my way over to Captain Scarlett's ship. The captain acts pretty chummy for now. She has intel on the treasure but no means to get it, and we have the means but no intel, so exploiting our mutual interests in the name of progress, she reveals that there are 4 pieces of a compass that are needed in order to find where the treasure is. And thankfully, she's already got a piece plus knows where another piece is, so plotting a course for the second piece, we'll need to make our way over to Hector's Folly to find and kill the Sandman. Before heading over, I spent some time clearing out some side quests like curing scurvy or stopping a union from forming. These DLCs all have their own little bounty boards and random fetch quests scattered about, so overall there's quite a lot of side stuff to do. I, for the most part, do all the side quests in this DLC, but admittedly as they go on I do give them less and less focus. Finally heading over to Hector's Folly, we start fighting our way over to the Sandman. While doing this, Scarlett explains that she and the Sandman used to be old buds until they found a piece of the compass and she tried stabbing him in the back for it. Doesn't really bode well for me, but whatever. We want treasure, dammit. Fortunately, fighting my way up to the Sandman wasn't too bad. The pirate enemies are probably one of the easier ones to fight compared to the other DLCs, and the weapons I had when I finished the base game were still working pretty well for me. When entering the boss arena, we finally meet the Sandman as well as his right-hand man, the Big Sleep. This fight turned out to be surprisingly underwhelming. The pistol that I was using, which I had previously used to beat Jack, did like 800% crit damage, so getting a couple of good shots in on the Big Sleep right at the start, his health was gone pretty quick. On top of that, I didn't even end up seeing the Sandman really. I blindly threw a nade in there while I was reloading at one point, and it just killed him in the background. Well, I guess I'm not really one to look a gift-bejeweled horse in the mouth, so we'll take it, officially putting the Sandman to sleep and securing our second piece of the compass. Rummaging through Sandman's things, we find an echo that he recorded revealing that the third piece we need is with Hyperion, who coincidentally is about to transport it to a new location, so we'll just need to intercept that transport and grab the compass piece. I'm a little surprised how easy getting the next piece turns out to be. All I really did was hop in the boat and hover over to the transport, which just turned out to be a couple of Hyperion bots. I suppose if you ignore the side stuff, the actual main missions aren't that long in these DLCs, which is a bit of a shame. Granted, I am a little spoiled by the Phantom Liberties and Shadow of the Erdtrees of today. The expectation for DLCs has definitely changed a fair bit in modern times. I'll chalk that one up to Witcher 3, that's the first one that comes to mind for me in terms of having basically a whole new game for an expansion. Who knows, if Borderlands 4 turns out to be any good, maybe we'll end up seeing some DLCs like that. Anyway, back to treasure hunting. While we were working on that second piece, we hear the roar of some huge creature off in the background somewhere. Scarlett tells us that it was the Leviathan and that it's now awoken. Sounds like we'll have a big fight coming up. Getting that piece back to Scarlett, we only have one more left to go. She unfortunately doesn't know where the last piece is, but knows a man named Herbert who's an expert on the compass. She also hands us a package to give to Herbert once we meet. I had guessed it was to convince him to help us, but boy was I wrong. Making our way over to Pervert the Herbert, we find that he's actually just king of the simps. As far as Herbert is concerned, if Scarlett is involved, so is he. However, he doesn't immediately agree to help us this time though. First he wants us to go find a bunch of love letter echoes he made for Scarlett, so that she knows how much he cares about her. Though upon making our way over and approaching the crate with the tapes, there's a big explosion which ends up scattering them around the area. Spending the next couple minutes running around collecting the tapes was more tedious than anything. I'm not too crazy about this particular form factor for quests, but eventually I get all the tapes and get back to Herbert. Satisfied with us getting all his tapes, he finally clues us in to where the last piece of the compass is. Turns out he's had it all along and has kept it in a very secure location. This unguarded chest outside. The lock on the chest is rusted shut, so we'll need to shoot it open. Except as soon as we did, the shot broke the compass piece too. Great. Thankfully, Herbert should be able to fix it. We'll just need to head up to the refinery and get some spare parts for him. The refinery wasn't too bad, thankfully. I actually enjoy fighting the loaders quite a bit, with how the joints are also crit spots. The 800% crit damage on the pistol I had made the fights nice and satisfying. While we were making our way through the area, Herbert also lets us know that once we get all the pieces, we'll need to combine them and take them up to this lighthouse, where it'll shine us a path over to the burial spot of the legendary treasure. Arriving near the end of the refinery, we encounter a little boss fight with a big bot named Hurley. Like Sandman though, this guy turns out to be a bit of a chump. Like any of the other bots, he also has joints that crit, so he ends up taking a lot of damage really quick. From there, all that was left to do was grab the last piece of polycriton and make my way back to Herbert. Now that the last piece of the compass was in hand, Scarlett reminds us that she gave us a little something to give to Herbert. I completely forgot about this package at this point, but seeing as we were giving it to him after he helped us, I could see where this was leading. The game actually makes it a choice whether we give it to him or not, and I feel like normally I wouldn't have, but at the time I was still a little peeved by all the running around we had to do for those love letters, so I said fuck it and watched the man get blasted to oblivion.
I knew she cared!
Oh, sorry about that, Herbert.
Heading back over to Scarlett, we start putting the compass together and prepare to head over to the lighthouse. I figure at this point we're pretty much near the end. There's a few areas of basic bandits and pirates to fight through here, but nothing especially noteworthy. The big guys are a bit of a pain, but that's mainly because their crit spot is so hard to hit with their big helmets on. For anyone curious, by the way, I was upgrading the motion side of the skill tree that gives the phase lock the brainwash feature. Admittedly, I'm not the best at doing builds or deciding what to focus on in skill trees in general, to be honest, so I wouldn't really be surprised if the brainwashing wasn't the ideal move for Maya players. But nevertheless, it was definitely helping, especially if I could pull it off on the bigger tanky guys or Goliaths. After a bunch of fighting, we finally make our way up to the lighthouse. Ascending the ladder up to the top, we place the compass in position and watch as it lights our way over to the treasure. Big surprise, Scarlett wastes no time turning on us. As soon as the path to the goal was clear, she sent in her goons to take us out. We of course make short work of the fodder and quickly head over to the treasure as well. Arriving at the spot marked by the lighthouse, we aren't greeted by treasure or Scarlett, but actually the Leviathan itself. In one quick move, the beast ends up swallowing us and Scarlett whole, leaving us to do battle within its belly. I forgot to mention, but all those times the Leviathan was foreshadowed prior, Scarlett would also usually bring up how it ate her favorite pet Roscoe back in the day. Well, turns out Roscoe is alive and thriving in here too, so climbing onto his back, Scarlett and Roscoe attack us. I really like that Roscoe's a rack hive. It was a real throwback to the first game. Thankfully though, I had a much easier go of it this time around and took it out pretty quick. I was a little disappointed that Scarlett just magically disappears once Roscoe goes down though. I feel like that story doesn't really conclude satisfyingly, but at least that means we may see her in the future, I suppose. Getting yacked out, we find ourselves face to face with our final hurdle, fighting the Leviathan itself. This fight took me forever. Not sure if there was one that I just didn't see, but as far as I could tell this guy didn't have a crit spot, so I ended up spending a good bit of time here, just firing away at him with whatever I had on me at the time. The constant sandworm spawning was also very annoying. I generally tried to ignore them where possible in favor of keeping up consistent damage on the boss. But you know, I think the biggest hindrance of this fight for me was the fact that Maya's phase lock ability was pretty much useless here. There wasn't really anything to use it on, which kind of tied one hand behind my back a bit. Eventually though, I spray and pray enough to where I empty out that health bar, finally officially beating the Leviathan and my first DLC of the game. The big treasure we were hunting for in the next room was also pretty good, but compared to what I already had, I don't think there was anything especially worth using that I could find, so I don't really end up benefiting too much. I'm guessing the spot is farmable though, so at least there's potential for something worthwhile for those of us that have the time to grind it out. I'd give this DLC a pretty good. I believe it was the first one released for the game, and like most things, there were a few rough patches that could slow down the momentum between quests here or there. But there wasn't anything especially standoffish about it, and overall I still had a good time. Speaking of momentum killers though, on to the next DLC. After the defeat of Jack, Hammerlock is interested in a bit of a hunting trip, so requesting our assistance, we join him in the search of mysterious creatures out in the swampland of Pandora. This probably won't come as a surprise to many of you, but my feelings are pretty mixed about this DLC. I'll try to highlight some of the sore spots for me as well as the parts I enjoyed. Heading over to rendezvous with Hammerlock at the hunting lodge, we get our first encounter with the local enemy type, the Savage Warrior people. It becomes evident right away, but I think out of all the DLCs, I found that these guys were the absolute worst to deal with. A lot of them had shields, some had crazy magic abilities, and overall they were just weirdly tanky. It made most enemy interactions throughout the DLC feel like a real slog and really slowed down the pace. While clearing out the enemies, we get a call from a Professor Nakayama, who seems to be under the impression that we're here for a ship. Hammerlock makes sure to specify that we're only here for a hunt and don't actually care about him or his ship at all. Once we get ourselves situated at the lodge, we get a look at our next new vehicle at the Catch a Boat station. While I'm plenty appreciative that we get a new vehicle at all, I wasn't too crazy about this boat. The weapons were fine, but I didn't really have a reason to use them much, plus I felt like the map wasn't really designed well to have an open world vehicle in most areas. There were times where I felt like I was just getting in the boat only to drive it a couple yards before getting out and needing to walk the rest of the way. For example, consider this bounty board quest called Still Just a Borak in a Cage. You pick it up in the lodge over here, and you need to go all the way over here. Hopping in the boat, I was ready to drive over, but we're literally just going over here before switching back to being on foot. What's worse is that there's straight up a fast travel point from here to here. I mean, other than the Skyla's Grove map later on in the DLC, it just never really felt like there was a reason to use the boat. But I suppose that despite all my rage, it is a little nitpicky and not a huge deal, I guess. It just felt really noticeable while playing sometimes, you know? Anyways, making my way over to our first big creature, a Stallion called a Thermitage, we begin our first real hunt of the DLC. Like the humanoid enemies, the creatures in this DLC were also a bit difficult to fight. The shots I was taking at the creature didn't do too much damage, but I had a grenade on me that did damage based on my level, so I was mostly relying on that for the big numbers. After a bit of that, we managed to kill the beast. Nakayama starts getting jealous that we really did only just come here to hunt. He seems to want us to come over there and fight him, so not really having much of an option, we'll need to head over there and save the world again. I will say I do like Nakayama somewhat. The idea of an insecure rebound villain definitely lands for me, and I enjoy his portrayal. It's just everything else that pulls it down in the rankings for me. Pivoting our focus over to Nakayama and his scheming, Hammerlock reaches out and says he's picked up on some radio chatter over by a village that looks worth investigating, so we begin fighting our way over. While doing this, Nakayama also unsolicitedly exposits that after Jack's death, he filled his ship with iridium and Hyperion equipment in the hopes of making a clone of Jack to finish what he started, before crashing his ship into the swamp and getting locked out, that is. A Jack clone would definitely spell disaster for us at Sacrifice, so running over to the village as quickly as possible, we find a group of the locals worshipping their god. This deity conveniently turns out to be none other than our door unlocking expert, Claptrap. After saving Clappy from his godhood by killing all the worshippers, he explains that all we really need to do to stop the professor's plan is to destroy his samples of Jack's DNA. Makes sense, and thankfully Clappy knows where it's all kept, so plotting a course for the professor's temporary lab in Arderton Station, we start making our way over. Tracking down the samples took a bit, but after fighting our way through the areas of goons, we managed to destroy all the samples of Jack's DNA. All that was left from there was to shut off the power to the lab. Thankfully, this was all contained within the same area more or less and didn't involve too much running around, so finding the switch shortly after, we disabled the power grid and ruined the good professor's plans. Unfortunately though, Nakayama still had a few cards up his sleeve and unleashed a boss on us called Wound Spike, a Borok with a giant turret on its back and a handsome face in the front. I do struggle with this a fair bit. As much as I didn't enjoy aspects of this DLC, I can't say that the fights weren't challenging to some degree at least. Plus I enjoy the concept of half machine, half creature hybrids, just wish they utilized that idea a bit more. Anyways, as the fight with Woundspike goes on, I do get downed a couple of times, but eventually focusing my shots on that turret, I do end up destroying it, which completely turns the tides of the fight. From there I was only just a few shots away, so equipping a fire sniper I had that hit hard, I just blindly fired away while periodically phase locking for big damage, killing Woundspike not long after. Tragically, he transferred the fire effect from my sniper to me before dying, so ends up killing me from beyond the grave. I guess once a Firehawk cultist, always a Firehawk cultist. At this point, Nakayama only has one sample left back on his ship that he crashed, so it sounds like we're pretty much nearing the end. Heading up to the ship, I was pretty over having to fight through the savages, so I was mostly just running past them all, trying to get to the end as fast as possible. Making it to the ship, Claptrap gives us the code to the door, which is 134, and just like that we're in, ready for the final boss fight, Jackenstein. Taking a quick pot shot at him as soon as the fight starts, it looks like the crit spot here is on the machines on his back, so trying to focus on that as much as possible, we begin the fight. I hadn't really been using that 800% crit pistol for this DLC since most of the savages had shields or masks that could block crits, but since our boy Jack 2.0 didn't, I brought it back out, pretty much instantly destroying the first electrical bit on his back. After the machine on his back gets destroyed, he jumps away for a bit, leaving us to fight through some bots. The bots as usual aren't anything special, so I take care of them pretty quick, still using that same pistol. Once the fodder is cleared out, Jackenstein jumps back down, only to get wrecked right away. I guess I'll be back to the bots for a sec as he jumps away to his perch once more. The final time Jackenstein jumps down, I'll need to aim for the Jack mask in his chest. Since this still crits, it does some big numbers and he dies after only about 2 minutes of total fight time, the complete opposite of my drawn out fight with the Leviathan prior. With all his forces diminished, Nakayama finally shows himself on the upper platform, ready to fight us once and for all. Except as soon as he starts walking down the stairs, he trips and falls all the way down to his untimely death. Get fucked, I guess. With that, I'm officially done Hammerlock's big hunt. The next room over also had some nice loot, but I found that the buried treasure before was a bit better than this one, so similarly I don't really find anything worth using. I was warned by some of you that this DLC would be a bit of a stinker, but I figured that for the sake of the experience I should give it a play anyway. One of the big flaws to me was the story. The plot was really insubstantial and kind of just felt shoehorned in. There's a lot of ideas that could have been developed more and expanded upon, but ultimately don't, which leaves the story feeling unsatisfying by the end. Let's not forget about the enemies either. Good god, what were they thinking with those witch doctors? If you go into this with a sniper build or something that has a heavy focus on crits, then you more than likely will not end up enjoying this DLC. Getting through those enemy encounters were some of the most annoying fights that I've had to experience in this franchise so far, easily. Overall, I'd rank it well below Captain Scarlett's DLC. It really slowed down my pace with playing through these expansions and felt like a bit of a chore at times. Like many of you, I probably wouldn't recommend this to other newer players either, but for the sake of not being overly negative, it's probably best to give it a try and see for yourselves. I did see a few Reddit threads here and there where people actually enjoyed it and in some cases even preferred it to other DLCs, so who knows. At the end of the day, to each their own, I suppose. Torgue time, baby! Loot, pecs, explosions. Now this is a much needed break after Hammerlock's snooze fest. Not necessarily for the story even, but more so for the mindless loot and shoot mayhem that comes with the Borderlands experience. The Torgue tale begins when Tannis is in the middle of making an echo regarding a new vault that she discovered. A vault that is said to open when the champion of Pandora feeds it the blood of the ultimate coward. Much to her discontent though, her broadcast ends up getting hijacked by Mr. Torgue himself, claiming that he would hold a badass tournament to find the badass who's badass enough to win the vault. Seems simple enough. I really like the idea of making the vault be the endgame of this DLC. It's something the players would already be familiar with, so it makes it more desirable, I feel. Not wasting any time, we gotta get in on this arena, so heading down to the catch a ride, we start making our way over. No new vehicle this time, but honestly that's fine. It did feel a little weird not using a hover vehicle all of a sudden though. Anyway, arriving near the arena, Torgue explains that I'll need to climb my way through the popularity leaderboards in order to win it, as well as that I would need a sponsor to represent me. Sounds good, they should have a sponsor they can spot me, so I'll head over. The little town that surrounds the big stadium was filled with the competition, such as the burner crew or the mama's boys, so we gotta fight and take them out first. This wasn't too bad thankfully. Unlike the savage people of Hammerlock's hunt, these guys were just basic bandits, so my 800% crit was doing work again. Our fighting against the other teams here attracts the attention of the sponsor we were going to get, named Piston. Piston is number 1 on the leaderboards right now, and he's willing to take us under his wing. If he's already number 1, I'm not really sure why he would train a replacement, but whatever. We go with it, and we end up at our first major arena event. Similar to the areas outside, all the enemies here were just basic bandits, so after a few minutes of fighting, we managed to defeat all the waves of enemies. It's around here where the plot really kicks in. Revealing that he would never share the victory spoils, Piston ends up betraying us, turning off all the cameras in the process so that he can remain number 1 as he does it. Getting gassed and passing out, Piston's goons drag us away to the basement of the arena while the cameras were off. Thankfully though, we wake up in time and kill our way back to the outside. Once back on the surface, we overhear the broadcast continuing in the arena where Piston claims that we ran away when we found out that we would need to fight him for the number 1 spot, officially dubbing the Vault Hunter a coward. I see where that Vault prophecy is going now. It's okay though, as much of a setback that this may be, we've recovered from worse. The first step in getting back in the game at this point would be getting a real legit sponsor, so we plot a course for the cityscape area called the Beatdown. I love the way this part of the map looks. It was a real similar appeal that Opportunity had. Something about city areas, I guess. Arriving at our destination, we find that even despite the Coward's title, we're still number 5 on the leaderboard, so we just gotta kill the guys ahead. Luckily, it turns out that the potential sponsor we were looking for had been kidnapped by a guy who's in one of the 4 places ahead of me named Pyro Pete, so it'll be a real 2-rack 1-stone situation here. The next mission we'll need to do here in order to get to Pyro Pete is part of an overall theme of missions that are present throughout this DLC, and that's timed missions. This DLC has a fair few of these scattered about, and there's always a few iterations of the same timed mission, but with varying difficulties. Doing the first easiest iteration is typically mandatory as part of the main mission, and then the more difficult versions are made available as optional quests afterward. At first I really did try to get all these knocked out, but the harder version of each timed mission was just too difficult for me at the time, so other than the first easy pass of each quest, I don't really bother revisiting them. Once I finish the timed shenanigans, Pyro Pete reveals that I just gotta take an elevator down and rescue the sponsor. He makes sure to specify though, definitely not a trap. Anyway, taking the elevator down to the trap, we find that we're actually in a little arena where Pyro Pete ambushes us with a 1v1. Using his pants on fire, he blasts us with a stream of flames while fully covered in armor which blocked crits. Nothing to fear though, in true Torgue fashion I switched to an explosive gun which absolutely tore through his armor and also seemed to give him a crit spot, so quickly switching back to the Lady Fist, I killed Pyro Pete and jumped up to the 4th spot on the polls. Heading over to prisoner storage, it turns out that the kidnapped sponsor we were after ends up being a familiar face. It's none other than Mad Moxxie herself. I guess thanks to her experience as the old arena master, she's got an interest in picking up where she left off by taking over Torgue's Coliseum. Our goals were lining up fairly well, so she agrees to sponsor us, suggesting we rendezvous at one of her bars around the crater to talk strategy. Arriving at the badass crater bar, Moxxie explains that the next person I'll need to beat is a cannibal on wheels named Motor Mama. Motor Mama is a little outside my wheelhouse right now though, so I'll need to have a bit of a training arc first. Thankfully she's got the perfect trainer in mind to whip me into shape and sends me on my way to meet them. Pulling up to the location on our map, we instantly realize who the trainer is. Surrounding the entrance are a bunch of big explosives and could be none other than our little demolitions expert herself, Tiny Tina. I love that they got Tina for this one. She's hilarious as always, but it's also just really interesting to see her interact with other established characters like Moxxie. It's a similar sentiment with her own DLC next and even a bit of Lilith's DLC. You don't really get a good sense of her dynamic with the group in just the base game alone. Tina explains that the first step in our routine is going to be diet. She asks us to break into the backstage area of the Coliseum and fight our way to several different vending machines, grabbing handfuls of cookies at each, carb loading as much as possible. The backstage area was filled with big bots, and these ones weren't too receptive to the Lady Fist, so I was largely relying on an explosive gun here. Between the explosions and the phase lock, getting through this area wasn't too bad. We ran to each machine, got the cookies. Profit, right? Wrong. These summa bitches weren't even chocolate chip. They were motherfucking raisin. What am I, a freak? Who eats raisin cookies? Naturally, we destroy all the vending machines on our way out, achieving at the very least some strength training for all my efforts. Hell yeah. After a training arc like that, I'm so ready to take on Motor Mama. Thankfully, while we were busy, Moxxie found a way for us to lure her out. Similar to Pyro Pete, it's another one of those time trials. This time, it's a race circuit with multiple checkpoints for us to hit within the time limit. Admittedly, this death race takes me a few tries to do. Generally speaking, racing games were my biggest weakness, so it was to no one's surprise when I cocked up the first few runs. Eventually though, I do end up getting it, successfully luring out Motor Mama. Needless to say, I don't even bother trying to do the harder versions this time trial though. Before heading over to the fight, I had figured Motor Mama would be a vehicle boss, and remembering the struggle I had back with Mad Mel in the first game, I didn't want a repeat of events, so I spent some time doing some side quests here to get some XP. There was one interesting one among them called Everybody Wants to Be Wanted, where we needed to put up wanted posters of the playable characters. This came with some voice lines from Moxxie just referencing a trait of each Vault Hunter when their poster would go up. While not really being any kind of meaningful comments, it was just interesting to hear something about their silent protagonists. I think Tina's Dragonkeep DLC is probably the only other time that I can recall where we get interactions from our current heroes. Anyways, after grinding out the side stuff, we head over for the big fight. There's a bit of running around to restore the power to the front gate and stuff first, but after all that and fighting our way through the goons, we make it to the boss. Motor Mama is revealed being lowered into her chariot of choice, a bike with 2 sidecar-mounted turrets. Remembering that I walked into the arena on foot, I do get a little nervous that I'd get pancaked as soon as the fight started, but as we soon find out, we're not in any real danger. Her bike is super slow, can barely turn, and hardly hurts. Thankfully, that same explosive gun that I had been falling back on up until this point had come in clutch once again. It was tearing through Motor Mama's health right out of the gate and taking out the goons fast. I let the fight drag on a little bit so I could still hear the mid-fight interview with Torgue and Moxxie, but as soon as they wrap up, I carry on and total Motor Mama's bike. She ends up just an average walking enemy now, so getting the Lady Fist back out, I crit her into oblivion, officially securing the 3rd place on the leaderboard. At this point, our progress must have been making Piston really nervy, because all we had left to do was take out the guy in the number 2 position named Flyboy, and we would be ready for our final match with Piston. Before tracking down Flyboy though, we do hit a small snag in that the gates to the forge were sealed shut by Piston in his ongoing efforts to sabotage us, only furthering the self-fulfilling prophecy of the vault. Moxxie suggests that the stadium must have a set of keys somewhere, so I'll need to break in again and steal them. Getting the keys from the backstage area was a pretty simple in and out, especially considering we basically did this whole song and dance earlier with the cookies. Shifting our focus back to Flyboy, we enter the forge. Getting to Flyboy won't be easy. He's disabled the power to the battle board, so we don't have access to one of those timed missions that lure out each combatant. Moxxie mentioned that she knows where 3 of the power switches are, so I'll just need to do a bit of running around first to get the battle board restored. The forge was fairly time consuming to get through in the sense that this area was pretty big, so there was a lot of branching paths and side quests around here that I spent some time exploring. After finding and flipping all 3 access points, the power to the board is back, where we pick up the timed quest 12 o'clock high. We would just need to diminish the numbers of Flyboy's buzzard army, all the while stealing the cargo off each one. This wasn't too bad thankfully. With the explosive gun and the phase lock, I was doing enough damage to the buzzards to wrap this one up fairly quickly, successfully luring out Flyboy in the process. All that was left to do from here was to get to the arena and have the fight. Hell yeah, I've been waiting for this. We're so close to the top now, no one's gonna steal this victory away from me. Wait, what does it mean by this won't take long? Oh. Well, apparently there's no rules in this tournament, because Piston rolls up in a massive gun-covered blimp, killing Flyboy and ambushing us. Well, whatever. I guess if we gotta fight the blimp, at least it's a little more in our favor. Bigger target means more shots land, which means bigger damage, surely, right? Using the same strat as with the buzzards, I just alternated between phase locking and holding down left click with the explosive gun, and within like a minute the blimp was history. It was a little bittersweet beating the blimp so quick. I was expecting something a little more grandiose, like closer to the bunker fight, but I imagine this was largely because of the level difference at this point. I was about 8 levels ahead of the blimp, so there must have been a big damage diff, I guess. Piston manages to survive the blimp crashing somehow, so we're still in the number 2 position. All good though, that only means we're one move away from checkmate, so returning back to Moxxie, we get ready for the final battle. Entering Torgue's Coliseum for the final time, we overhear a quick exchange between Moxxie and Torgue about the future of the stadium. I'm curious to see if this ever leads into anything. These DLC always kinda give an anime filler vibe, so I wouldn't expect anything to spill over into the main canon lore, but I suppose why not? They do end up having canon events take place during spin-off games like the Telltale ones, so I guess we'll see. Anyways, the start to the fight with Piston, of course, began with him cheating. This man pulled up in a giant fire-breathing mechanical T-Rex called the Badassosaurus. This thing was actually super tanky, even with my level difference. Luckily, most if not all the projectile weapons had a really slow travel time, so as long as I stood far back enough, I could dodge most of the incoming damage. Like with the blimp, I'm sure there was a crit spot on there that the Lady Fist could do a number on, but hoping to maintain my brand loyalty, I tried sticking with the explosive Torgue rifle for the majority of this fight. So just spamming away with it, I eventually take out the Badassosaurus. Ejecting from the now destroyed dino, Piston gets ready for a long-awaited 1v1, all the while getting heckled by the crowd who now sees him as the coward he's always been. Like with Motor Mama, now that he was on his feet, I get the crit machine back out and started Lady Fisting him. From there, it didn't take long for him to die, spilling the blood of a coward all over the vault, successfully securing my position as Pandora's #1 badass. The vault itself didn't really have anything too worthwhile, especially compared to the last 2 loot rooms, but I suppose it would take a lot to get me to switch away from the Lady Fist at this point anyways, so not a big deal. I actually had a lot of fun with this DLC. Great map, great characters, and some solid comedy. Maybe this is controversial, but I think I would rank it slightly higher above Captain Scarlett even. While I really like the narrative and structure of Captain Scarlett's DLC, looking back at it after playing the others makes me really miss the presence of an existing character during the story. Tina and Moxxie were in the Torgue's DLC, and even Hammerlock and Claptrap were in the Big Hunt DLC. It just really helped connect the world of the base game and the worlds of the expansion, I feel. Granted, Captain Scarlett was the first DLC that released for this game, so I guess they did learn from that for the other ones. Anyway, speaking of having lots of existing characters, we're on to the 4th DLC. This one starts out very stylistically different than the others. There's not really a big voiceover from Marcus going over the story or anything. It actually starts with a little animated cutscene from our gang post the base game. While our playable characters are downstairs interrogating Hyperion guy, Tina hopes to pass the time with a little game of bunkers and badasses. Looks like the campaign would be between Morty, Brick, and Lilith, with Tina as the GM. Right at the gate, we get a good feel for how each of the characters feel about the campaign. Morty can't be bothered, Brick can only think with his muscles, and Lilith is surprisingly the only one taking it seriously. The cutscene ends and the game starts with a quick little moment between the characters as Tina mentions that they should wait for Roland. Lilith tries explaining that Roland is no longer with us, but it would seem that Tina ignored all that and carries on while under the impression that he just must be running late and would show up later. Getting immersed into the game world, our first objective in the campaign is to naturally head over to the nearest town. On our way, we get our first encounter with the skeleton people. I guess these would be the equivalent to the average bandit type enemies, so they weren't too bad. Among the skeletons there was also a little mini boss called Mr. Bony Pants Guy, but thankfully crits were no problem, so we blew past the opening area here, gaining access to the Flame Rock Refuge. Speaking with the locals, we learned that the queen had gone missing. Without her, the town would remain in eternal nighttime, so they ask us to find the queen's bodyguard, Eleanor, represented as Ellie in the game. Tracking down Ms. Rigby, we find out that the queen went looking for the Tree of Life in the woods to undo the nighttime curse, so we'll need to convince the gatekeeper to let us into the forest as well. Shouldn't be a problem, Eleanor did say he was a bit of a pushover. Speaking with the gatekeeper Davlin, he seems pretty receptive to helping us out and offers to escort us through the woods, except right before he actually opens the gate, Tina gets a phone call from Torgue asking to be in the game, so she swaps Davlin for Torgue, who's now demanding that if we want to get the gate open we gotta do some stuff for him. First would be to destroy the village blimps, which help to warn them of impending attacks, because why not? Not really having a choice, I go with it, and completely destroy Lilith's immersion in the process. Step 2 would be to head over to the tavern and help kick out some unwanted drunks. All went smoothly here until one of the guys called Moxxie a bitch on his way out the door, so Torgue asks us to track him down and punch him so hard that he explodes. Sure, I guess, Brick must be loving this, so I chase the bar patron down and punch him into a great big fireball of an explosion. Hell yeah. Torgue was almost about to make more crazy requests from us, but Lilith, who's very annoyed about the immersion breaking that's happening, asks Tina to revert back to Devlin, to which she agrees. Heading into the forest, it takes Tina a second to settle on a good theme, but she ends up going for dark, gloomy, and full of human-eating trees. While tanky for sure, the Ents weren't too bad, so we zoom past them fairly quick, finding that there's a trail of jewels left along the path, presumably left by the Queen. Following the jewels as far as we could, we eventually arrive at a dead end. Devlin notices that there's some orcish writing on the wall that explains how we can open the door to the next area, and that all we gotta do is grab a couple of blood fruits from the orc village nearby. I figured the orcs and the minotaurs would be like the brutes and Goliaths, but they honestly felt a lot stronger. I stuck around this village for a good bit after to do that protect the sapling mission, but honestly these guys were kicking my ass big time. Mostly because I was also starting to run super low on ammo, so I don't end up hanging around here for too long. So after grabbing the blood fruit and killing the tree ants, we quickly run back to the door ready to progress and enter the next area.
Morty, you look different.
Huh?
Oh,
Where's
your birdie? Your little birdie friend.
Tina, I told you what happened to Bloodwing.
I'm sure that'll
So anyway,
bring a
she's
nice
so
home
cute.
in some
Where is
orc's
she?
face.
Let's just play the game, alright?
Denial, Anger, Initiative, that is the name of the current main mission after all. I'm loving the way they sprinkle in these little real moments for the characters. More on that later though. This next section introduced yet another enemy type in the form of knights. Tragically, knights are typically hella armored, so that'll be a no-go on hitting crits for a while. While in the area, I also do a quick little side quest called Lost Souls. It took me a while to realize at the time, but this is very clearly a reference to Dark Souls. Kinda puts me in the mood to play through some of those as well. I've only ever beaten Elden Ring, so if anyone's interested in a Soulsborne video at some point, let me know. Back to searching for the Queen, we end up at yet another dead end. Once again, Tina suggests that we wait for Roland or this next part won't work, which gets Lilith even more upset. But before Lilith could finish explaining again, Tina deflects and says that she's thought of a way and that we would need to go find someone named the White Knight. Thankfully he's fairly close by, so we'll quickly run over, only to be greeted by none other than Roland himself. Well, an NPC version of Roland that Tina made up for the game anyway. It was honestly kinda comforting having him back in the game. He's so present in the first half of the base game that once he dies, his absence is really felt and noticeable. As Brick poignantly points out, this can't be healthy, but you know, fuck it. Would have been such a shame if Roland's VA didn't get to be in any of the DLCs. Following Roland back to the dead end, he uses some kind of magic, I guess, to open up the path, allowing us into the next area. Beyond the dead end is an area called Vitality Grove, where the Tree of Life took root. If our intel is to be believed, then the Queen should have been on her way here to reverse the curse, but she's nowhere in sight. Devlin ends up interjecting that there's some more orcish writing here that says that we can undo the curse on the tree ourselves, so we should do that first, and then go look for the Queen after, so we hand him a spare blood fruit and let him do his thing. I don't know what curse breaking is supposed to look like, but the tree turning red wasn't giving the right vibe. Our suspicions were confirmed not long after when Devlin disappeared, revealing himself to be the handsome sorcerer all along. Also, as it happens, the curse undoing spell is actually a Ghost King's summoning spell. Great. The battle with the Ghost Kings were pretty tricky. There were 4 Ghost Kings in total, and my general strat was to Lady Fist them while they were walking, and when they went into flying head mode, their heads wouldn't crit anymore, so I'd switch to the explosive gun. This worked out fine, but in retrospect I probably should have used the explosive gun the whole time. The Lady Fist really didn't do too much even with a crit spot. Probably a sign of it reaching the end of its usefulness tragically. I do end up mainly using something else when I do the fight for Sanctuary. Eventually, I managed to beat all 4 Ghost Kings, earning myself a promotion in Roland's eyes. Turning in the quest, he dubs me a Knight of the Queen and sends me on a rescue mission towards the Dwarven Mines, where I'll need to take a shortcut to reach the handsome sorcerer's tower on the other side. Making our way to the mines, the gang's gonna need to come up with a plan first.
Whoever rolls highest will talk to him. Throw them dice.
20!
Damn, Brick, nat 20, alright, let's do it. Tracking down the Dwarven King, he welcomes us with open arms, explaining that he would love to do battle by our side. Perfect, it's all set up for us. Go ahead, Brick.
I punch him!
Wait, what?
If you just talk to him, we can...
I punch him!
Well, now we're enemies to the dwarves. Except those guys, they're cool. Moving on from that little hiccup, it looks like we'll be on our own, so we carry on through the mine, eventually running into a wizard across a long, narrow platform. The little guy tries to stop us from going further though, claiming that the path ahead is simply too dangerous. We insist we must go on, but we soon find that the path is blocked by a big enchanted locked door anyway. But wait a second. Lucky for us, the wizard is conveniently an enchanted door unlocking expert, so we run over to ask him for his help. According to the wizard, the enchantment is done using runes, so we'll just need to run around the mine and find each rune to disable it. Should be simple enough, so we set off and spend some time running around down in the mines, now fighting the dwarven enemies as well. While the rune collecting was taking place, we got a call from a dwarf named Greedtooth. I guess after what we did to their king, Greedtooth has taken over and now allied with the Sorcerer against us. Despite the dwarven resistance though, we managed to make it through, arriving at the third of the 4 runes. This rune had a bit of a puzzle to it, and I like to think that normally I would have done the puzzle, but at the time I could not be bothered in the slightest, and I punched the cube, effectively completing it. I love that they made this an option. If the PS4 Spider-Man game has taught me anything, it's that some people just need a skip puzzle option. After securing the 3rd rune, Greedtooth lets us know that he's holding onto the 4th and final piece, so we'll need to head over and fight him for it. Entering the boss arena, we roll a good perception check and notice a floating globe around Greedtooth. We have a brief exchange with him and do a tiny bit of damage, but as soon as he jumps back to the platform behind, I destroy the floating globe, freeing the dwarves from the sorcerer's brainwashing magic. Grateful for breaking the spell, they offer me the final piece of the rune.
Thank you for... Whoa, wait a minute! You're the jackass who killed Ragnar the Emancipator! Die!
Right, how could I forget? Damn it, Brick. So we end up continuing our fight after all. I decided to shift my strat up here and started to just hurl nades at him. I was still using that one that dealt damage based on my level, and honestly it cooked him. Greedtooth was down within a few nade throws and the final rune piece was ours for the taking. Nearly at the end now. Jumping through the portal that was conveniently there, we end up back at the locked door with the 4 runes. The letters on the runes read RATF, and we just need to unscramble them to unlock the door. RATF. Gee, I wonder what that could spell out. Not raft, that's for sure. Just for that I'm keeping the T piece, now it's just far. The Sorcerer's Tower, finally. I was mostly running past enemies here, fighting only when the numbers got really high. In most cases, my firework nade was my saving grace. It did really well with small groupings. There was a bit here where I had to fight through a few waves of knights before the gate to the next area would open, and using the combo of phase lock to pull the knights into a group followed by a nade was carrying me throughout the whole battle. Once past all the fighting, we arrive at the bridge up on the tower, where the handsome sorcerer contacts us to let us know that he'll be sending down his dragon to take care of us before we get any closer. This fight was a bit of a toughie, mostly because on the ground level were a bunch of smaller dragons, so it was difficult dividing my attention between the two. Tina was sensing that the fight was proving difficult for us, so she calls in Roland again to help us in the battle, much to Lilith's discomfort. This did really help with the fight though. Using the brainwash phase lock and Roland's auto turret, there was plenty of passive damage getting thrown around so that I could focus on the boss's health bar. It goes smoothly for the most part. I get downed once and nearly die, but managed to catch a second wind in time. With only a bit more left to go, I fired a few quick final shots and killed the handsome dragon.
Loot, baby, baby!
All right!
Hell yeah!
It's nice to see that even Morty's getting into it now. After the dragon's defeat, the sorcerer invites us up to the top of the tower for the final fight. Running towards the elevator, I pulled the lever ready for the battle, only to plummet down towards the below ground dungeon. Well, okay I guess. One more section left to go, no problemo. Thankfully, we see the return of the voice in my head, calling for help this time. Assuming that she's a prisoner down here and that she might know a way out of this dungeon, we decide to go look for her. Getting through the dungeon did take me a while. I was doing some side stuff down here and it turned out to be fairly long quests. Eventually though, we do end up tracking down the location of the prisoner. Tina even brings Roland in to help us once again, but it upsets Lilith a lot more this time. She tries to tell Tina that she can't just pretend it didn't happen, but Tina cuts her off again with more in-game plot developments. Jumping down to the holding area, we find the prisoner cuffed to a pillar. Rolling for initiative, Brick manages to get another nat 20. This guy almost goes for the punch again, but Morty manages to convince him not to, and they talk to the prisoner this time. She asks that we free her, and in return she'll show us the way to Father Sorcerer. Not seeing any harm in it, we go along with the idea only to get blindsided by the prisoner. Go figure, it was all according to the handsome man's plans, so once again we find ourselves in a boss fight. Thankfully, she's no match for the Queen's Knights. We're quickly able to take out a quarter of her health before she jumps away and sends in tiny spiders to attack us. After a bit of fighting the little guys, she jumps back down. The general strat here is mostly just keeping my distance and going heavy on the explosives. Between the gun, the nades, and the phase lock, we were doing a reasonable amount of damage. The only problem was that the firework nade is kinda weird to throw, so a fair few of them were wasted when it bounced off something and shot off in another direction. The boss has a moment or two during the fight where she regains a bunch of health, so we do end up spending a good bit of time chipping away at her. But after what was apparently a really good throw and some great slag bonus, I managed to take out the last quarter of her health bar, as well as all of my own, with a single nade, thus finishing the fight with a second wind. Seeing the comparison to Angel, Lilith voices some dissatisfaction with needing to have killed the sorcerer's daughter, saying that she wasn't as bad as Tina seems to think she was. But Tina doubles down and says that if it wasn't for Angel, everything would have been fine and nobody would have died, finally opening up a bit about her struggle through the still fairly recent tragedy. Fed up with his efforts to keep us away going astray, the sorcerer gives in and re-enables the elevator to the top of the tower, now for real ready for the final fight. There's a tiny bit of fighting leading up to the area, but we eventually arrive at the teleporter taking us up where we come face to face with the sorcerer. As soon as the fight began, I went to town with the Torgue gun, which did some nice numbers on his armor. His moveset was fairly similar to his real-life counterpart where he dupes himself into clones. With the AoE from the nades though, I'm able to get rid of the clones fairly easily and revert back to the 1v1. I quickly laid into him with the crit machine and took out phase 1 pretty quick. Phase 2 didn't start with any armor, so I continued the same strat and went all in on crits, completely ignoring the other goons that got spawned into the fight. This went fairly well since I took out about half his health bar right away. He gets a bit more aggro after half, so just doing circles around him to avoid his spells, I continue keeping consistent fire and managed to take out phase 2. Phase 3 was slightly trickier. He spawned in the mini dragons this time, which hurt a lot more, plus he would float up into the air, which made it a little harder to keep track of the ground enemies when focusing him, similar to the handsome dragon fight. After a couple minutes of focusing on crits and walking in circles, I built up enough damage to where he teleports to the back of the arena, waiting for us to finish him off. Doming him with a lady fist from across the arena, we officially defeat the final boss. Almost. In her hurry to celebrate, Tina brings in Roland once more. This time, everyone's a lot more vocal about their discomfort with the situation, and how Tina needs to accept that he's gone. In the background, during the chaos of all the incoming comments from the group, we see the sorcerer rise again. He ends up firing a spell at Roland while his back is turned, before it cuts to black. Spotlight on Tina, who's reached her limit. She exclaims that she knows he's gone, but it's her story, and that she wants him there. The group, seeing how upset it makes her, backs off and tells her that they want him there too, and agree to let him be part of the story. So resuming the campaign, she continues that as the sorcerer's spell hurled towards the knight's back, only a miracle would save him, and that it did. Moments before contact, our other fallen comrade Bloodwing swoops in to intercept the spell, unleashing a flurry of attacks on the sorcerer, sending him to fall to his doom, officially defeating him for real this time. All that was really left to do was to free the queen. At the start I was under the assumption that the queen would be Angel, but after what happened back in the dungeon, I really had no guesses as to who the queen would end up being, and as it happens, for good reason. Upon opening the doors, it's revealed that the queen is none other than Stallion, the diamond pony that Jack told us about all the way back on the southern shelf at the start of the base game. Fucking fantastical, man. Gathering some iridium to feed her, she charges up and unleashes a spell, restoring the light to the kingdom once more, officially ending the campaign while simultaneously flashbanging me in my room at 1 in the morning. In the pre-credit scene, we see that the gang erected monuments to Roland and Bloodwing, where Tina was able to say her goodbyes once and for all. I loved this DLC. Easily goes above the other 3 for me. Admittedly, the Swords and Shields kind of fantasy doesn't really rank high on my nerd interests, so I was 50-50 going into the DLC, but I'm all in on story stuff, so I really liked that they used this as an opportunity to show the characters grieving the loss of the ones that didn't survive the base game. Tina, being a younger, comedy-based character, was perfectly utilized for the narrative. Being able to undercut the serious moments with the humor worked well in my opinion, and provided a nice look into how Tina processed the loss in her own way. This DLC also allowed for some really interesting character interactions. For example, there was Salvador agreeing to be the likeness of the dwarves, or the end cutscene where we see Maya enter the room and say a whole sentence. These are small moments for sure, but with what essentially boils down to silent protagonists, it does offer a unique perspective. Overall, I found this to be a great one to end on with the 4 expansion DLCs. All that's left now is to close it out with a quick pre-trequel. A short while after the defeat of Jack and the fall of Hyperion, the raiders begin setting their sights for the stars, to those other planets with vaults that was hinted at the end of the base game. While they were looking towards the future, mysterious forces had their sights set on Sanctuary in the present. Here we go, final stretch. We open on a shot of the group arguing over their inaction lately. Despite their knowledge of the other vaults, they aren't committing to the search for them fully yet. Morty believes it's their lack of leadership that's bringing them down, but Ellie interjects that Lilith has made it clear that she does not want the job. Before the argument could lead anywhere though, the alarms begin to sound, alerting them of an impending attack from unknown assailants. Wasting no time, we head into town square and begin fighting off the attackers. This isn't too difficult, but does go on for a bit. After spending some time fighting away the never-ending waves of enemies, their leader finally emerges. Lilith realizes they must be after the key, so she calls all the raiders back to HQ, but it's too late. The enemies already begin pouring into the command room, driving the raiders back and away from the key. Realizing they have no options left, Lilith calls on Roland for strength and uses her siren powers to simultaneously teleport all the citizens out of Sanctuary, deciding to live to fight for the key another day. As expected, the teleport isn't perfect, so it ends up randomly scattering us around. Deciding to find the others and regroup, I set out on a search for the raiders. During our search, the leader of the enemy forces makes a public broadcast introducing himself as Colonel Hector of the New Pandora Army. To summarize his whole spiel, he's got Sanctuary, the key, and devious plans in progress. Among that, he's also got some kinda toxic gas that causes the growth of mutant plant monsters as well as turns people into weird hybrid plant creatures. Using the floating city like Jack in his lunar base, Hector began raining down enemy forces on us, and I hate to say it, but the Lady Fist and Torgue guns I had just weren't really cutting it with these guys. I figured the plant guys would probably be weak to fire, and thankfully I did have some fire guns on me, so I end up switching to those mostly for the rest of the DLC. While fighting off the plant monsters, we overhear a survivor calling for help nearby, so we divert our attention towards rescuing him. There's a couple of monsters around harassing him, so we'll need to fight them off. While I was fighting off these guys, there was a badass sprout among them. When running over to loot him, I saw a gun with a sparkly name. This DLC has a whole line of these colorful weapons, skins, or shields, and the Nirvana, thankfully, is a fire weapon as well, so I'll end up using it a lot. Apparently, from what you guys were telling me down in the comments, some of the drops I got in the base game were pretty rare, so I did look it up this time, and saw that this particular gun is a 1% chance drop, so damn, that's pretty lucky. Once all the forces were fought off, Hector reveals that his plan is to somehow take Pandora into a golden era that he calls Paradise. With the enemies now gone, we also finally find that survivor named Vaughn. Vaughn is just one of the local bandits from around this area, but Hector is a bit of a common enemy at the moment, so he agrees to join forces, and we get started on using his base as a camp for the rest of us. Fortunately, his base has a lot of fire-related defenses, so it was perfect to keep the plants away. We just need to quickly run around turning some valves and re-enabling his quote-unquote firewall. With a base for the gang secure, Lilith teleports in with Ellie, ready to settle in. Lilith also considers just teleporting into Sanctuary and blindsiding Hector, but it turns out that he's covered the city in that plant gas of his, so that's a no-go. Tanis suggests that she could make an antidote if she knew more about the mutations, so she asks that we collect some mutated flowers for her to study. Shouldn't be a problem. Heading over to the area marked on the map, there's a lot of spores and infected creatures around. Tanis warns us that I'll need to be conscious of my exposure levels to the spores. Too much and I'll die for sure. So being extra cautious, I'll head inside and start fighting off the creatures. Pushing through the area, we track down the flowers we need and take a little sample for Tanis. While doing that, she observes that the way the gas mutates the creatures implies that it must be something man-made, and as a scientist, she's impressed by how complicated it must have been to develop it. She's going to need some more human brain samples to further her research on the subject, so she asks us to take the elevator upstairs and try to find some formerly human subjects. This next area has a mix of the new Pandora army soldiers as well as the plant creatures. Thankfully, the Nirvana was working well on all of them, so it wasn't too bad. The only main issue is that among their forces are medics and other more armored types who could tank incoming damage like champs, so there were some challenging bits here and there. Eventually, we collect all the brain samples we need, revealing that the gas actually mutates a spore that already exists on Pandora and within its residents. Unfortunately though, Tannis says that it's likely beyond her capability to create an antidote for something this complicated. Back to square one it is. Returning back to camp, we rendezvous with Lilith, who has now located and teleported over several other friends from back home. She says that Tannis is going to continue working on the antidote, but in the meantime we need to find a way back to Sanctuary. This is where Mordecai radios in, saying that he's got a good vantage point with his new pal Talon, a newly adopted feathered friend, and he's got an idea of how they might be able to get back into the city. The conversation gets cut short though when a bunch of infected psychos start attacking from outside. Luckily for us though, Ellie had some time to set up some auto turret defenses, so we'll need to head out in front and help make sure all goes smoothly. And smoothly it went. With the turret's help, we cut through the enemy forces easily, so the gang could rest easy knowing that they were safe within the confines of Camp Backburner. After things calm down a bit, Tannis radios in that she's managed to trace back the gas to a potential creator, a scientist named Cassius. Somehow Vaughn seems to recognize the name. He claims to apparently know Cassius and says that he'll give him a call. I was expecting this to be a gag at first, but he actually picks up the phone. Vaughn asks him flat out if the plant stuff was him, and he seems confused at first, denying the allegation, but soon flip-flops, realizing that Hector tricked him supposedly. He offers to get started on an antidote right away and directs us towards his lab in the old doll mine. Knowing what this game tends to pull, I was super skeptical, but he sounded for real, so it was 50-50 to me on whether this would be a trap or not. Not really having much of a choice, we go along with this as the plan for now. Though first we decide to go meet up with Morty in the field before making our move on the mine. Arriving at his camp, we see that the soldiers beat us to it, so we start fighting them off. It looks like Mordecai was attacked just before we got here, so following Talon, we gotta start searching for him ASAP. As Ellie expressed earlier, Lilith didn't want to take on that leader role, primarily out of fear for losing her friends in battle because of a choice she had to make in command. Now with the leader role being thrust upon her during a crisis, she finds herself in that exact position, facing those fears now that Morty has been attacked. Thankfully, as we push further in, we eventually run into a still fighting Mordecai. He's barely hanging on though, so jumping in and joining in the fight, we fend off the last of the new Pandora forces in the area. Once things look clear, Lilith bamfs in to check on our old friend. Unfortunately though, Morty reveals that they crop dusted him with the gas, and that he's been infected with the mutagen also. Lilith is completely on edge at this point, fearing for the worst. She still has hopes for a cure though, and tells us to push through that mine and get it at all costs. Except, no can do. As we find out shortly after, Hector already considered all this, so he planned ahead and reinforced the mine doors with tritanium, so much so that even Lilith wouldn't be able to phase through it. Back to camp to regroup it is. Back at base, Morty throws out a good option during the brainstorm, suggesting we use Helios, the Hyperion moon base that they crashed into Pandora after the base game. Helios has some strong cannons that might be able to punch a hole through the tritanium, as confirmed by Vaughn as well, whose previous bandit outfit lived in the wreckage of Helios. Vaughn, however, adds that in order to get to the lunar base now, we would need to go through a dangerous area called the Burrows. At least we have a good plan of action now. It does suck that it's delaying us from the antidote though, so with Morty in mind, time is of the essence. Nah, I'm just joshing. Now's the perfect time to do some side quests. Morty will be fine, I hope. So I spend the next little while grinding out some optional missions. First up, I go over and talk to Moxxie. She's always got something fun for us to do.
Hey, Sugar. I've got something important for you. In case you didn't know, my son Scooter, he died recently.
Wait. What? Yeah, so I guess Scooter dies in Tales from the Borderlands. I'm not too crazy about him dying in a spin-off game, but I did read a bit about how he died, which was the most Scooter thing I've ever heard, so I do kind of want to play the Tales games now. If anything, just to say goodbye to an OG character. Anyway, after I spent some time sorting out Scooter's last will investment, as well as helping Ellie getting through taking over his old job, we catch our ride in our Rainbow Runner best and hit the biggest flaming ramp we could make. R.I.P. Sweet Prince. Fueled by our loss, we finish up whatever side quest we had available and get back to that main mission grind. Entering the burrows, we start making our way over to the Helios crash site. Enemy types are for the most part the same here, with the addition of sandworms as well. It's not too bad to get through though, so we start fighting our way past. It's not long after that our fighting is interrupted by additional raider support, thankfully. Our main man Brick caught wind of Morty's infection, so he decided to join us in the fight. Now that's a true homie right there. With our powers combined, we blast through the next couple of areas, quickly arriving at the wreckage. There's a couple of shields on either side blocking us though, so there's a quick segment of running around, flipping switches, and destroying the shield generators. Once our entry into the base is secure, we part ways with Brick so that he can guard the entrance, while I head inside Helios and start heading towards the big cannon. Helios ends up being fairly enemy dense, so we do spend a good bit of time here fighting off a lot of the new Pandora goons. While we're doing all that, we hear over the echo that Lilith isn't actually sure how to use the cannon. That's where our homegirl Tina interjects that she knows how, but Lilith is apprehensive about putting a child in the middle of a war zone, understandably so. Tina must roll a nat 20 persuasion check here cause she insists that she's the Raider's demo expert and that Lilith can just teleport her in quickly now that we're here, and not long after Lilith ends up giving in. Nice. I like that we're getting a little bit of everyone involved in this quest, with Brick earlier and now Tina and Lilith. Really makes the missions feel more alive when it isn't just back-to-back rooms of enemies sometimes, you know? Bamfing in, Tina doesn't waste any time getting to work. She explains that the regular moonshot shells won't cut it when it comes to punching through titanium, so we'll need to find some real good armor penetration rounds. Deciding to divide and conquer, Tina starts working on the missile and I start looking for the parts she needs. She asks that we find her some explosives to put inside the missile as well as some stabilizer fins to aim the thing. Thankfully this doesn't take too long at all. As usual, we just gotta run over, fighting a couple of robots on the way. The items we need weren't too far apart from each other as well, so it doesn't take long before we find everything we needed, and Tina summons us back to assemble it all. Putting it all together, we find that we're only short on one final piece, a power core from the bot bay, so we'll get ready and make our way over. While we were searching for the stuff before, Tina was laying it on pretty strong with her bits and gags, but before setting out for the power core, she opens up to us a bit, explaining that she's really scared of failing and losing Morty, and how that's really weighing on her. Again, I love that they're giving Tina so much depth. It's most probably because her comedy aspects are so strong, but the occasional serious undertones really hit harder with her. Kinda like that echo from the late Scooter, where he gets real serious and thanks us for letting him fulfill his dreams and become a vault hunter. Anyway, she quickly apologizes for being a bummer and goes back to business as usual. Thankfully, we don't need to wait long before we encounter something that cheers her right back up. Getting back to finding the power core, we drop into the bot bay, initiating a boss fight with a massive bot, much to Tina's delight, named Uranus. This fight went pretty similarly to Saturn. The boss didn't really move around much, so just hiding behind a little wall right next to the entrance, I took turns peeking out and unloading all over Uranus's crit spot. At this point, while I am mostly using other guns, I still have the Lady Fist equipped, so I largely end up using that for this fight since there's a crit spot. In retrospect, I really wish I had prepared better in terms of what guns and elements I kept on me. Inventory management was a bit of a nightmare for me in this game, so I don't really give the elemental stuff much forethought, but I'm sure something corrosive would have been great on Uranus. Returning to Tina with the power core, she puts it all together, ready to be armed. She gives us the option of doing it, but hints that she really wants to, so we end up letting her do the honors. Arming that bad boy and heading down into the viewing area, we launch the missile, absolutely annihilating the door keeping us from the mines. With that, there shouldn't be anything stopping us from finding the good doctor and getting that antidote from Morty. Before heading into the mines, we quickly head into the back burner to grab some of Morty's blood for the antidote. While we're here, Cassius reassures us that while Mordecai's condition is fairly advanced now, it isn't incurable, thankfully. With the vial of blood in hand, it's time to head over and get the cure finally. This would also be around when I noticed the video quality on the recordings, so it should be nice and clear from this point onward. Again, really sorry about that. Getting through the mines does end up taking a good bit. There's a lot of new Pandora guys around that we'll need to fight our way through first, as well as a side quest to find some echoes on the way. I won't get into it too much, but the Echo side quest reveals a lot more about how we got to Hector's whole uprising. It basically boils down to Hector and his team getting cucked by the Doll Corporation. While going full Swamp Thing probably isn't the best solution to get back at Doll, understanding how he was trapped in the mines watching his team fall apart at the hands of Doll's lies probably means that by the time we meet him, he's likely a few cards short of a full deck, if you know what I mean. It just really helps to establish the character's motivation and desperation to right the wrong that was done to him and his men. Anyway, after a bit we end up reaching the lab. Cassius says that he's just over in the containment unit in the middle of the room. A containment unit filled with gas. Great. Thankfully, his mind isn't completely lost to the gas yet, so he begins talking us through synthesizing the cure. Unfortunately though, we hit a snag pretty quick. Earlier, while we were making our way over, we passed through a decontamination chamber which seems to have compromised Morty's blood sample. Presumably reaching the final stages of his own mutation, Cassius bites the bullet and explains that they don't have enough time to get another sample for Morty. He was hoping to use the cure on himself as well, but it's too late now, so he decides to sacrifice himself and requests we kill him to use his own blood. How very samurai of him. Honoring his request, we opened the holding chamber and let him loose, beginning the boss fight. The fight was actually pretty chill. Nirvana and Toothpick, which I found right before entering the mines, were tearing through him pretty effortlessly. Plus, avoiding the incoming damage was fairly simple, especially since Brainwash seemed to work on him as well, so there were brief moments of reprieve. After a couple minutes of dodging and shooting, we managed to put him out of his misery. With a viable sample in hand, we head back to the lab equipment and get the data we need for the cure, sending it to Tanis to synthesize an antidote for us all. Hooray, we did it! Oh, but so did Hector. As soon as we get our hands on the cure, Hector announces that he's done mass producing the gas and is ready for Pandora to be born anew. Patricia can make the antidotes, but not that fast, so we're gonna need to stop Hector ASAP or Pandora's gonna get wiped out. Looks like it's time for us to end this once and for all. Heading through the door at the back of Cassius's lab, we somehow but conveniently find ourselves in the now overgrown sanctuary. Finding through Sanctuary is largely a lot of the same old. With so many new Pandora guys around, I mostly just stick with a strong sniper and try to speed my way through while one or two hitting most guys with a crit. Thanks to the quick encounters, it doesn't take long before we reach the boss fight. Hector, with the key in hand, gasses himself and mutates into Ultra Hector. I start unloading with the Nirvana right away, but it turns out this fight is going to take some time because Hector is hella tanky. The name of the game here is just going to be moving as much as possible. Hector's aggressive but slow, so as long as I'm constantly moving I can avoid most of the incoming damage, while dealing plenty back. After about an eighth of his health, he introduces a defense phase where he just shields himself and sends out some goons to keep us busy. The particular flavor of goons in this case were in the form of lycanthropes. Thankfully, these guys were all bark. As big and scary as they looked, they went down insanely fast, so taking them out was a breeze. From there, I just had to shoot some of the infected flowers to get Hector to switch back to offense. At this point, we also get some nice backup from Lilith, who flies in with her siren wings to do some damage and keep the little enemies distracted. Once Lilith joins the fight, there isn't really anything new to the flow of the fight, it's just more of the same, cycling between offense phase and defense phase. So rinsing and repeating for 10-15 minutes, we eventually get enough hits in between to empty out his health bar, officially defeating Hector and saving Pandora once again. Almost. He gets his scream moment here and comes back for one last scare right before we could get the key. As it happens, Hector's roots have spread into the city's heart, so Lilith asks us to bring us some iridium from a nearby cache, hoping to contain the spread. But as Hector soon explains, it's too late. The key/map is part of him now, just like Sanctuary and just like Pandora is soon to be. Finally coming into her role as a leader, Lilith makes her choice, teleporting us and herself away and using that iridium to blow up Sanctuary instead, killing Hector once and for all, presumably destroying the key as well. Lilith is distraught about losing the city and the vault map, but as the Allfather says, Sanctuary is a people, not a place, so as long as everyone's safe, that's all that really matters. Plus, we never had a map to help us find the first or second vaults, and we certainly won't need one to find the rest. She tells the gang to spread out across the galaxy and to start tracking down those vaults. She also adds that she will stay behind in Pandora, looking to rebuild the raiders. Ellie asks Lilith why she's really staying behind, sussing out that there's more to her intentions. Lilith confirms that she believes the vault key survived the explosion and is still out there somehow, and she intends to find it herself, officially ending the Borderlands 2 DLCs. I'm so glad I ended up playing these DLCs, man. My initial goal was largely just avoiding missing out on anything before Borderlands 3, but it turned out to be so much more than that. We laughed through Torgues, cried with Tina, and said hi to some new characters and goodbye to some old ones. Sure, there were some bad eggs in the bunch here or there, but the few negative aspects never felt like they detracted from the overall enjoyment at all. While dissatisfying for sure, they were never deal breakers for me. It just felt great to have more content in the game to experience. Plus, these criticisms are largely to my taste and opinions, so there must be fans out there who like these aspects, which is awesome. Now that 2's all wrapped up, I'm really excited to start some of the other games. Tales from the Borderlands is especially on my radar at the moment, with the whole scooter thing. There's also Tina's Wonderland, which I yoinked during the Steam Winter Sale. I'm really looking forward to this one as well, with how well they've been writing Tina during these DLCs. But I think more than anything, I'm just insanely curious about how bad they fuck up Borderlands 3. Y'all have been talking mad shit about 3 in the comments, and you for the most part stayed spoiler free, which I'm super grateful for, so at this point I just want to boot up 3 and see what all the fuss is about for myself. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. A divided franchise for sure, but can't say I'm not spoiled for choice at least. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, consider hitting like and subscribe. If not, feel free to hit dislike. For now, that's all from me. See you next time, friends.